Lesson 3, reference. In our previous lesson, we discussed what cohesion was. We got to understanding what relationship cohesion has with discourse analysis, what the importance of cohesion in discourse analysis is. We explained that cohesion is the grammatical relationship between different elements of a text. We explained that it is the glue that holds different sentences to make a meaningful whole. Now, within cohesion, what really helps us glue these sentences together are cohesive devices. Now, we would be remiss if we do not understand the major function of cohesion. Now, the major function of cohesion is text formation. Okay, as we defined text formation earlier in lesson 1, we said it is as we discussed a text. Now, the major function of cohesion is text formation. And remember, we defined text as a unified whole of linguistic items. Now, if this text is to be unified, it means we have different linguistic items that are unified. And what we used to make this uniformity is what? Cohesive devices. Now, in this lesson, we're going to look at the first type of cohesive device. We are going to look at reference as a cohesive device. What is reference? You remember how in every academic writing, you need to give references at the end of the page. What purpose is that for? You give reference because you want to make a connection between your citations in the main writing and the owners of those works. So let's say in the first paragraph of your paper or the first page of your paper, you cited Halliday. So we want to know exactly where Halliday said what they said, or maybe want to prove that Halliday really did say what you implied in the citation. What do? We go to the references. So what we're doing really is, what we're doing there is making a reference, kind of like in writing a CV. You have written all these qualities about yourself, so you want your potential employers to prove whether or not what you've been saying about yourself is true. So in your reference, you are going to indicate which people your potential employers are going to have to talk to in order for them to ascertain exactly what you said. That is reference. So reference simply points at something. It simply points, it simply gives a physical representation of what you've put across. Now, let's look at reference in discourse analysis, or reference as a linguistic device. Reference is used to describe the different ways in which entities, things, people, or events are referred within a text. So there are certain items in any language that cannot be interpreted semantically in their own right, so rather they make reference to something else within the text. Let's take, for instance, pronouns. We say the linguistic feature, certain linguistic features like pronouns are used to make a reference. Pronouns alone cannot be interpreted semantically. Okay, so we know for certain that when a pronoun is there, then it's probably referring to something else. So pronouns are used to refer to something that has already been mentioned, because obviously if in your entire sentence you will begin by putting a pronoun there, people would wonder exactly who or what are you referring to. So that is where reference comes in. Let's look at a few examples. Dr. Foster went to Gloucester in a shower of rain. He stepped in a puddle right up to his middle and never went there again. Dr. Foster went to Gloucester in a shower of rain. He stepped in a puddle right up his middle and never went there again. So in this example, he refers back to Dr. Foster, while there refers back to Gloucester. So there is a simple example of reference and how exactly it is used in a piece of discourse. Now, reference also has its types. So reference can be subcategorized as follows. We have reference. Okay, then reference is divided into two different types or two different categories. That's exophora or exophoric and endophora or endophoric. Within endophoric reference, we have what we call anaphora or anaphoric reference and cataphora or cataphoric reference. Now, reference in cohesion can be subcategorized as follows. Now we have reference, and then we have exophora. Within reference, we have exophora or exophoric reference, and then within reference again, we have endophoric reference or endophora. Now within endophora, again, we can subcategorize it into two different types. That is anaphora and cataphora, or anaphoric reference and cataphoric. So what is exophoric reference? Exophoric reference occurs when a word or a phrase refers to something that is outside of the piece of discourse, so outside of the piece of writing. Now, you'll see how it contracts with the other one. With this one, you are not pointing at something that is within the particular text, but instead you're pointing at something that is outside of the text. Let's look at some examples. They're late again. Can you believe it? I know. Well, they'd better get here soon or it will get cold. They're late again. Can you believe it? I know. Well, they'd better get here soon or it will get cold. Now, in this sentence or in this piece of discourse, they refers to some people outside the discourse known to both speakers but has not been specified within the text. It again also refers to something that Speaker A and Speaker B know about but has not been put in the piece of discourse. So we are not pointing at something that is within that particular text. We're pointing at something that both speakers know about but hasn't been specified in the text. Now we use exophoric reference when when there is some shared knowledge between two speakers, that is between the reader and the writer, or the listener and the speaker. And sometimes within the conversation, we might not specify exactly what we're referring to, but both speakers, or rather the listener and the reader, both ends know exactly what it is that they're talking about. Some other examples of exophoric reference would include what we call generic terms, like everyone. Everybody refused to participate. Everyone participated in the contest. Nobody wanted to do the chores. So when the speaker said nobody, obviously the listener knows to say which group of people are we talking. Now, we have not specified to say which one exactly, but obviously the listener understands which group of people we're talking about here. That is what exophoric reference is. Okay, as for endophoras, for the other type of reference, as for endophora, it is the exact opposite of exophoric reference. Now with this one, as we speak or write, we often refer to things that were mentioned earlier in the text. In contrast to exophora is referring to something that has not been mentioned in the text. Okay, when we say someone, that someone was not mentioned in the text. earlier. We are referring to something general, something that is not within the particular text. Now that is different with anaphora. Anaphora will refer to something within the particular text, something that has been mentioned earlier or earlier on in the sentence, or will be mentioned later on. So what is anaphoric reference? Now in anaphoric reference, this one occurs when a word or a phrase refers to something that was mentioned earlier in the text. Okay, in the text. So you have a sentence. Okay, you have a sentence in sentence one, or you have a string of words. In sentence one, you mention the name of somebody, or you mention something, the name of something, a thing. There was a noun there in the first sentence. Then in the second sentence, you decide to skip over the name and then use its corresponding pronoun because you do not want to make repetitions. So that is where anaphoric reference comes in. So you tend to use the pronoun that corresponds to the earlier mentioned noun to avoid repeating the same word. Let's look at these examples here. Michael went to the bank. He was annoyed because it was closed. Michael went to the bank. He was annoyed because it was closed. So in this sentence, he refers to Michael. Okay, the noun that was mentioned in the beginning of the sentence, the subject that was mentioned in the first sentence. Okay, so instead of bringing back Michael in the second sentence, we decide to replace the Michael with the pronoun he. He referring to who? Michael. And it referring to the bank. That is anaphoric reference. So the difference really between the two is one is mentioned earlier and the other one is mentioned later on. Let's look at cataphoric now. Okay, so what is cataphoric reference? We say cataphoric reference occurs when a word or a phrase refers to something that was mentioned later, or that is to be, if a word or a phrase that is to be mentioned later in a piece of discourse. Okay, so in your first sentence, you begin with the pronoun. Okay, knowing that as you move forward, you're going to know who or what that pronoun refers to, what that pronoun is pointing towards. Okay, so in cataphoric reference, you are going to find the noun in front of the sentence, and then you're going to begin with the pronoun and then find the noun in front of the sentence. In contrast with anaphoric reference, which of course begins with the noun as the subject, and then later on we find the pronoun in front. Let's look at some examples. Although I phone her every week, my mother still complains that I don't keep in touch often enough. Although I phone her every week, my mother still complains that I don't keep in touch often enough. So her refers to what? My mother. But we began with its pronoun and then found the noun in front. So this one would say it refers forward. If it refers forward. Okay. Another example would be the book was there on the table. I'd never read Moby Dick, and I didn't intend to do so, and I do not intend to do so now. The book was there on the table. I would never read Moby Dick, and I do not intend to do so now. And here in this sentence, the book, which was mentioned earlier on, okay, refers to what? Moby Dick, which was mentioned later on in the text. So that is what differentiates anaphora from cataphora, or those are the subcategories of reference. Where we have exophora, just to recap, we have reference And then within reference, we categorize reference into two types. That is exophoric referencing and endophoric referencing, or exophora and endophora. Okay, so in exophora, we mentioned to say this is where you are referring to something that is outside of the text. So you're not pointing at something within the text, or maybe we should say you are not, if you are looking for what is being referred to, you are not going to find it within the text. Instead, you find it outside of the text. That is to say that whatever is being referred to is known by the speaker and the listener, or by the reader and the writer, without necessarily being mentioned in the text. That is exophora. And endophora, which is again subcategorized into two different types, that is anaphora and cataphora. With this one, you find the reference, the reference is done right within the text. Okay, the difference between the two, however, is one, that is anaphora, okay, will first mention the noun and then make the reference forward. So you have the thing, and then you have what it is pointing at in front, forward, exactly. Then cataphora. Now cataphora is where you mention its pronoun, okay, or you mention the general, and then you go and specify and point at the exact thing in the second text. So the first one, that is anaphora. In anaphora, you're going to mention the specific thing, okay, that is to say the noun, and then you're going to mention in the second sentence, rather than mention the name again. What we're trying to do here is avoid repetition. If you're going to make your text more romantic and more interesting, you're going to try as much as possible to avoid repetition, because that then becomes boring. Okay, so how do we avoid this repetition? That is where we replace the noun with its pronoun. Replace the noun with its pronoun. We try as much as possible to repeat the same word over and over again, to keep repeating the same noun over and over again. That is where anaphora comes in. So in the first sentence, you mention the noun. In the second sentence, you're just going to mention its pronoun. Okay, knowing to say that the reader will go back to the first sentence in order for them to understand what that pronoun was referring to. Okay, and with cataphora, you begin with its pronoun, you begin with the general, and then the specific is found in front. That is why they say you refer forward. Let's take a look at the following diagrams. References. For example, take a look at this. This is situational. We are pointing at something that obviously the listener is seeing, but it has not been mentioned in the text. We do not know what this is. If I'm reading this days after it happened, then I'm the third party and I do not understand what this is referring to. However, the two people involved in the dialogue will understand what this is, because it's obviously around them. That is situational. That is exophora. And the second, and this other one, for example, Maria is very happy. She is pregnant. Maria is very happy. She is pregnant. Okay, then example sentence number 2, because she is pregnant, Maria is very happy. Same sentence, same meaning, except the contrast here is one is cataphoric and the other one is endophoric. Okay, that is happening within the text. So within the text, that is equal to endophora. Situational, that is equal to exophora. So the former there is anaphoric referencing, where the noun has been mentioned, and then in the second sentence we avoid mentioning the specific, so we go ahead and mention the general. And then the second one, the latter, that is cataphoric. So again, to recap, situational equal to exophora, and text equal to endophora. And within endophora, we have cataphora and anaphora. Those examples that we just mentioned. The former is anaphoric because the pronoun she refers back to the proper noun. So with anaphoric, we're simply just going to go back to the proper noun. We are going to go back to the sentence, to the beginning of the text, in order for us to find the reference, the thing that is being referred to in the second one. Okay, and then the latter is cataphoric because the pronoun she refers forward to the noun Maria. Now here's how, in writing a story, here's how you tend to use anaphoric and cataphoric reference to make your writing a little bit more interesting and less boring. Let's look at this for instance. At home, looking through the window, he stood in silence. David felt lost. At home, looking through the window, he stood in silence. David felt lost. Let's look at it. Let's try and read this in a different way. Let's try and get rid of the pronouns. Let's try and get rid of the referencing here and just see how it's going to look. Okay, at home, looking through the window, David stood in silence. David felt lost. At home, looking through the window, David stood in silence. David felt lost. That is how a sentence is going to sound. It sounds repetitive, doesn't it? That is what would happen if we were to read a piece of writing that is not coherent, that has no referencing, where we do not have anaphoric or cataphoric referencing. A second example, the horse had run the whole show. Now it was worn out. The horse had run the whole show. Now it has worn out. Let's read it this other way. The horse had run the whole show. Now the horse was worn out. Still doesn't make sense, does it? So let's see if we understand exactly how to contrast anaphoric from cataphoric referencing. Now these two, at home, looking through the window, he stood in silence. David felt lost. And the second one, the horse had run the whole show. Now it was worn out. Let's see if we can identify which one is cataphoric and which one is anaphoric referencing in the two sentences. We move on. So at least with the lesson today, we understand exactly what tools we use in referencing. And we can tell the different types of referencing, and we can tell exactly how to use reference in a text. And so we'll continue in the fourth lesson, where we will look at another type of cohesive device.